Before we do an intro to this video or anything like that, I wanted to say a couple quick things, just before we get to the episode. So, initially, pray for Damar Hamlin if you are so inclined. We are recording this the day before it comes out, so mid-afternoon on Tuesday. We really don't know a whole lot about that, so pray for that young man's recovery. Also, in this episode, we will not be talking about the LSU situation because, quite frankly, I'm not going to put my ass on the line for that because we don't know enough true concrete stuff about what's coming out. So if you are interested in hearing what that is and kind of learning a little bit more about it, feel free to look for other folks. I'm not tied in like that in the college football world, so I'm going to leave that one off the plate. But now, let's go ahead and enjoy the video. Hello and welcome back to the From My Prospective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could change the football landscape in the very near future. So it's been a minute since I've been able to sit down and do this. I took last week off for the holidays, kind of letting myself rest a little bit. Plus, I had some places to be, as we'll get to talk about kind of in the middle of this episode. But we've got a whole run of different things we want to talk about. Some of that portal stuff that's happening, the college football playoffs, my personal experience at the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl. And we're going to get up to all of that in just a second. But before we get to it, please like the video. Please subscribe to the video. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me out a ton. I'm just trying to grow the channel. Okay, so let's go to college football playoff time because, man, oh man, this has been just a wonderful time to be a football fan in that aspect. That weekend was such a wonderful weekend. I was on planes and traveling. Luckily, the flight I was on had access to live television. Didn't know that was even a thing. So I got to watch the bulk of the TCU Michigan game, which was great. I caught all the way to the very end of it. And then later on, I got to kind of welcome myself into 2023 with Ohio State versus Georgia, which was another incredible game. So I just want to talk about how special this weekend has been for the college football playoffs and how just pumped up people should be about the big game that we've got coming for us next Monday. Obviously, that being between TCU and Georgia. Okay, so I've heard it, said on other platforms, and I believe it was ESPN that mentioned it. This is the best selection that they've ever had for the college football playoffs. This is the best they've done to pick the correct four teams, and I could not agree anymore. I don't want to act like I came up with that thought process or that ideology on my own. I know I heard it from somewhere. I couldn't tell you exactly from where, but they were spot on with that analysis. Very truthful in that matter, that we could not have had a better arrangement of college football games than we did on that weekend. So absolutely bravo to the committee for this year. And this was just a huge reminder on why we love college football. Because, Max Duggan and the Frogs continue to be a team of destiny, a team that shouldn't have never have been here. If we're being completely honest, they probably should have capped out at about 8 wins. But that's not how college football works. That's not how this year works. And the Frogs are in the national championship. Then, like I mentioned, you go to the next game, Ohio State versus Georgia. The Buckeyes were a field goal away from toppling this team that we had perceived to be unbeatable. This team that we had no real challengers at the mountaintop. They were one good kick away from absolutely challenging the unchallengeable. And so we did still end up with Georgia in the championship, but man, this week could have just as easily been Ohio State versus Michigan in the finals for Monday. And we were a couple plays off from that actually happening on both sides of the coin. So it's just been an incredible thing to witness and, really digest. So I do want to do a little bit of talk about the game that we are going to see. We're on path for Dogs versus Frogs. And, early lines were set at 13.5 in favor of UGA. Think about that. It's a college football playoff game. It's the championship game in college football, and one team is favored by almost 2 touchdowns over their opponent. That is absurd to me. I get it, though, because, again, you can't base everything off one game. UGA throughout the large majority of this season has looked untouchable. They have looked every bit of the team that we thought that they could be coming into the season. Not me personally. You can go all the way back to my most overrated. I had Georgia on that list, but they've proven that they are very capable of repeating and will have the chance to do so. So, yeah, you can't set the line just based on one game. UGA has just been dominant. The Peach Bowl was a rare, thing. We don't get to see that very often from the Bulldogs, so don't, or probably at least don't expect to see it again. Here's my holdup on, just outright anointing Georgia as the champion. TCU has the mental edge by such a wide margin. I mean, absurdly wide margin. Everything past week 4, which is where I've earmarked this scenario, which was against Oklahoma, has been, why not us? Why can't we be the ones to just continue to push forward, win our bowl games, get into the playoff game, and, make some noise and truly go from a team that you didn't hear a lot about in the preseason to being the team that nobody will stop talking about this offseason. That's what they're chasing right now, and I think that you're going to have a lot of that anyways, win, lose, or draw in this game. It feels like in a lot of ways, they have already won, just because of the fact that they are in this final. And I'm not here to hand out participation trophies. I'm not here to hand out moral victories. But man, Sonny Dykes is going to be a hero at Texas Christian University for maybe eternity, just on the back of one season, his debut season, might I add. And it's just going to be such a fun game. Personally, I did find that line a little early, that 13.5. I went towards TCU. That's not advice. That's not anything. But I'm going to say that it's going to be a little bit closer than that. I think that this game could end up being such an electric thing to watch, and this is the most excited for a national championship game that I have been in quite a while. Not because of the team talent, or not because of really having any stake as to who's going to win this game, just because from what we've seen of the college football playoffs already through 2 of the 3 games, it's been dynamite. It's been incredible, and I can't wait to see more. I can't wait to see how they put the bow on this season of college football. Okay, so I'm wearing the shirt that I got there. I mentioned it at the top of the podcast. I was in Tucson this past week for the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl. I'm very fortunate to work at a job that allowed me to go out there to cover that, paid for my trip out there, and I got to see a lot of cool things. I got to really feel the atmosphere of a bowl game, which is the second bowl game I've ever been to. I was at the Cotton Bowl between Arkansas and Kansas State when I was a little younger, but this is the first one as a true adult and somebody who really is going to remember everything that happened from it. And man, it was a special experience. And this is not my pitch to get a job at Barstool or anything, but the atmosphere and the true just vibe of the whole thing was so cool. I mean, they did a really good job of setting it up to feel like it was something to behold. Like, it was a spectacle. It was an event, if you will. And if you're a fan of Barstool, or you're okay with going against that traditional media outlet, which I would imagine if you're listening to a podcast, you probably are. But if you're okay with going against the grain and seeing something that you're probably never going to get to see again outside of Tucson, Arizona, or if Barstool purchases a different bowl or whatever. But if you're okay with having that difference and more of less strenuous, less stress, less suit and tie, and more having fun because this is football and that's what it's supposed to be, you would absolutely love that experience. You would love watching the Barstool Bowl. You'd love being there. It was an incredible thing to be at. And everybody I met there, Barstool personalities. Personally, I do watch a lot of Barstool Sports, and I talk to a lot of the folks that you can see on their various shows and what have you. Everybody was super nice to me. I mean, that's an easy spot. You're sponsoring a bowl game, and it's an easy spot to be like, I don't have time, or I don't this, that, or the other. But, Spider and Brandon Walker and Roan, and I got to talk to just so many really cool people, and it was a really great experience. So if you do ever have the opportunity, if your team's playing in the Barstool Bowl, or, you live kind of in that region, I would advise going to it as my little sales pitch that I am not getting paid to do. It was a really cool time, and hopefully I get to make that journey again at some point in the future. Okay, so that's enough free advertising for now, at least. I want to go back to a topic we've been following on this podcast for, quite a bit of time, and that is Wisconsin. Since they've hired Luke Fickell and what they're doing, he just continues to add quarterbacks to this roster. We had talked about Nick Evers, coming in whenever that news broke, and kind of how I was interested to see how that all plays out. We won't even see how that plays out for another year because he's now brought in SMU quarterback Tanner Mordecai, somebody I've been a big fan of. If you want to go all the way back to a previous podcast I had, not even the From My Prospective, but back whenever I did Tank Observers, you can see my praise for Tanner Mordecai. He's now going to be a Badger. He's returning to the Power 5, and this could be a really, really cool thing to watch unfold because you're starting to see this layer of a plan formulate out for the Badgers, and Luke Fickell's at the head of it, and he knows exactly what he wants. Wisconsin's been doing a lot of stuff. I'm not a Wisconsin fan. I don't. You've seen me wear a bunch of shirts if you're a regular viewer of this podcast of different schools. I don't think I have a Wisconsin T-shirt. I might be wrong, but they're not just a program that I just absolutely love or anything. In fact, I kind of got on their ass whenever they fired Paul Chryst. But if I would have known this is what was coming, wouldn't have done that, obviously. So yeah, like I mentioned, they added Nick Evers to the program. They're not done. They got Tanner Mordecai, who was at OU previously. Then he went to SMU, and now he is in Wisconsin. So he's kind of been all over the world, but he's making a return to the Power 5 for his final year, and he's likely going to be the full-time starter for the upcoming season for Luke Fickell. And now, like I mentioned, there's a clear plan being designed by Fickell in his first few months in Madison. You've got the next 3 quarterbacks lined up if you want to include Mabry Matauer, who is in the 2024 class. He's a 4-star. There's a real clear ladder of how you're going to go with this, where it's Mordecai next year, go off to the draft or, graduate or whatever you do. Evers for either a year or 2, depending on how his development goes, and then you shift Mabry in there, so then you've got the next year or 2. And it's really cool to see whenever a coach comes in and immediately, as soon as his feet hit the ground, you can see the plan. And it's not just, we're going to portal everybody on their mother in, but we're going to find what works for this year, what works for the year after that, so on and so forth. And that ladder of progression of as to how he's going to proceed in the Big Ten is really, really cool. Like, I don't know that I've ever truly experienced it through this lens, because obviously I'm looking for stuff to talk about on the podcast, and Wisconsin has provided me a lot of those. And I don't know that I've ever quite seen it as clearly as I'm seeing it with the quarterback situation in Wisconsin, because it's going to be really cool to watch it all unfold. And it's going to be an exciting thing. I've been saying Wisconsin is going to be a big deal addition, or Luke Fickell's going to be a big deal addition to the Big Ten and to Wisconsin. So I'm very excited to see how all of that comes together. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here, another guy that I love bringing up. I do know I have his current school and will remain his current school, as well as a t-shirt that he personally is linked up for his NIL deal, Grayson McCall. Grayson McCall I had even mentioned for the Wisconsin potential spot. We know that the SEC was looking at him because he had to cancel a thing to Auburn. Florida had been kind of rumored. He's decided that he's not interested. Interestingly enough, he has decided, you know what? I'm sticking it out at Coastal, get my name out of the portal. I'm here to stay. So, what was, in my personal opinion, the 1A quarterback that you could have gotten in the portal, you can't even get because he's staying home. He's staying in Myrtle Beach. And as to kind of what the thought process was here, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that he decided to stay at Coastal for that bowl game. So he really couldn't open up his recruiting too much. He kind of came out and said, at least from what I understand, that he wanted to wait until his time was up at Coastal to really dive into his options. Now, that did not stop him from setting some stuff up. He had the Auburn meeting set up prior to the bowl game he was going to go after, but he canceled that meeting ahead of the bowl game, so it was at least there in principle that he was going to attend or show up and see what they had to offer. I did not expect this at all from Grayson. I really did think pretty confidently that he was going to be moving up to the Power 5, but there's a couple different things you have to remember here. There was a good span of time where, and this might not be entirely true, he might have ran into a couple people and they might have told him this, that, and the other, but Coastal was really the only one who could consistently make a pitch to him, and I think that's probably what Tim Beck did whenever he got in. That bowl game kind of helped restore why Grayson likes that school so much, why he enjoys being a Chanticleer, why he pisses teal, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, whenever he announced he was coming back for the 2022 season, he had the hashtag I piss teal. It's actually on the t-shirt that I have from him as well. But, Tim Beck really had all the opportunity in the world to make the pitch at him, so I think that he kind of had him in a spot where he could feel comfortable enough to treat him as if he was in the portal, but not for himself, and kind of lure him in as a prospect when nobody else really had that same level of opportunity. So very smart play on Tim Beck's part, if that is what happened. Something I would also like to mention before we move on from this topic, something to keep an eye on, January 16th. Remember that date until we pass it, because that is the deadline to enter the NFL draft. I think Grayson McCall probably would have said as much, that he has changed his mind about transferring, that he wants to be a champ for forever, and I'm going to the NFL draft or whatever. But, there's still opportunities. He could, his agent or some representative from the NFL could absolutely tell him, hey, you're probably QB5 in this class if you wanted to come out. Don't know how much you could rise up because of age and whatever, but it's a possible option. It's a feasible one that he goes pro at the end of this year instead of sticking around. But, you only have 2 weeks or so until we have to know that for sure. So just stand by until we pass that date. But okay, what else in the transfer portal do you want to talk to me about? Are there any bowl games you want to hear my opinion on? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to talk to you about it. You can get on my social medias. Both of those will be linked down below. I've got a podcast with my buddy Alex Eisman where we talk about the MMA. That's also going to be linked down below. There's a ton of different things that you can get into, but just make sure you talk to me and let me know what you're thinking. I'd love to have a little bit of discourse with you. But all right, that is episode 56 of the From My Prospective podcast. And as always, I'll see you next time.